mountains around her are empty, the plains are wide, indifferent sea of wind. And yet, carved into that silence is a fortress that the government built to hold the people it fears the most. The men who could topple organizations, inspire terror, or commit violence, so calculated it still scares the courthouse clerks at night. You may have heard its nickname, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, but what happened here is more than legend. This is the story of a place designed to make escape impossible, contact an afterthought, and control total. Welcome to ADX Florence, America's Supermax, the world's most protected prison. Before we continue, please, if you know you enjoy content like this and many more on this our channel, not just for entertainment, but also informative and educative, and you want to hear more of this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss out on our next episode. Your likes and comments help us reach more viewers who love true crime stories just like you. So take a second to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Thank you. In the early 1980s, the federal prison system faced a terrifying reality. Inmates who could, with cold determination, murder corrections officers and fellow prisoners inside maximum security facilities. 2 bloody incidents at USP Marion, stabbings so violent they were described as architectural failures. Force a question. How do you keep the worst of the worst contained without risking the lives of wardens and officers? The answer was radical. Design a place that minimized human contact, removed opportunity, and embedded redundancy so complete that escape became not a matter of luck but mathematical improbability. The idea, a new control unit prison, was proposed by Federal Bureau of Prisons leadership and shaped by hard lessons learned at Marion and other control units. ADX sits at the high plains of Fremont County, Colorado, flat land that runs outward toward the Rockies, a 2-hour drive southwest of Denver. The complex is part of the Federal Correctional Complex, Florence, a cluster of facilities with varying security levels. From above, the Supermax is geometric. Ranges of concrete cells, watchtowers like blunt sentinels, a ring of razor wire, and a buffer trained dogs and sensors. You arrive at the sight of towers, thick walls, and a silence that is not the absence of sound but the presence of restraint. The Bureau of Prisons lists it plainly as USP Florence ADMAX, Administrative Maximum Facility, but this antiseptic name hides an architecture control. Construction began in the 1990s, a deliberate reaction to a sequence of violent incidents inside U.S. prisons. ADX was commissioned when administrators concluded that some inmates could not safely be held in any other institution. The design process drew on correctional architects and planners who have been refining control units since the 1980s, from the Arizona Special Management Unit to Pelican Bay and Marion. Each iteration removing more friction, more chance, more human proximity. The stated goal was blunt. House inmates whose escape, influence, or violence presented a threat to national security, prison staff, or other inmates. ADX opened its doors in January 1995. The prison's designers were not drama directors. They were problem solvers. 2 Colorado Springs architecture firms, working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, translated policy into walls and corridors. Architects who designed prisons balance competing imperatives. Humane treatment, legal compliance, and in this instance, absolute restriction. They use computer modeling to simulate the many ways an inmate might attempt to exploit a flaw, and then eliminated those vulnerabilities. The result reads like a manual denial. Cells poured in reinforced concrete, windows angled so that outward sight lines are useless for orientation, fixtures welded or cast to prevent weaponization, and furniture minimized in non-movable forms. The blueprint was an exercise in removing tools and opportunities. The first cohort of officers assigned to ADX were chosen not only for training, but temperament. Where other prisons seek a balance of rehabilitation officers, counselors, and custody staff, ADX required staff who could operate in high-stress, hyper-controlled environments. Their training emphasized procedure over improvisation, door sequences, site control, non-contact communication, and the psychology of isolation. Early staff remembered learning that mistakes at ADX did not produce small failures. They could become catastrophes. The first wardens and line supervisors were bureaucrats and believers. Some saw the Supermax as necessary to keep other institutions safe. Others saw it as a social experiment with human lives inside its cells. These guards were the human margin inside a machine of control, the ones who read mail, pressed the release button, and sometimes broke silence to talk about what the job did to a person's soul. Imagine being woken by a guard's voice through a speaker and told to shuffle to a small slot for a changing of trays. You live alone. You exercise alone, under the eye of cameras. Your only human interactions, if any, are controlled and brief. Visits are rare, in a room where contact is limited by plexiglass and monitors. Cells are constructed of poured, reinforced concrete. Each is a module: secure bed, welded sink, combined toilet, a desk surface carved from concrete, and a small angled window that admits light but denies scenery. Noise is muted. Walls are sound deadening to stop inmates from communicating via thumps or coded taps. Books and letters are read slowly by staff to check for hidden messages. In short, ADX transforms geography into punishment. ADX's security is layered, both visible and invisible. Outside, perimeter fences with multiple lines of razor wire are combined with watchtowers and patrols. Pressure pads and motion detectors scan the approaches. Cameras with overlapping fields of view leave no blind spots. Thousands of electronic doors, many computer-controlled, can be locked down in an instant, isolating any segment of the facility. The gate systems are tied into control centers where cameras, alarms, and automated sequences are monitored 24/7. A panic closure can seal the complex in seconds. Inside, cells are designed to limit the creation of weapons, and windows and fixtures prevent the smuggling of parts that could be used for tunneling or improvisation. Security extends into mundane things. Mail is read, packages are examined, and even books are inspected for illicit compartments. In the strange calculus of ADX, every object is a risk vector to be minimized or eliminated. ADX is reserved for a small subset of federal inmates, those whose crimes or behavior place them beyond the reach of typical maximum security. This includes convicted terrorists, leaders of violent criminal organizations, prolific killers who continue to organize violence from behind bars, and inmates repeatedly violent inside other prisons. Its roster has included men responsible for landmark acts of terrorism and organized crime, the names that make headlines and the networks that feed fear. The label is not about sentence length alone. It is about the functional danger an inmate poses to life, security, or national interest. If you can orchestrate a plot from inside a cell, ADX is where the Bureau intends to stop that chain of command. Over the years, ADX has housed the most notorious names of modern American crime: Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma City bomber; Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber; Ramzi Youssef, 1993 World Trade Center bomber; Richard Reed, the shoe bomber; and, at times, international figures whose transfer carry political as well as penal significance. High-profile drug lords and gang leaders have also been sent there to sever their ability to command outside organizations. These are inmates for whom standard prison control proved inadequate, and whose presence at ADX underscores the facility's role as the endpoint for those deemed uncontainable elsewhere. ADX represents a policy choice. When someone's capacity for violence or their influence over others is such that traditional corrections cannot ensure safety, the state chooses containment above rehabilitation. Critics argue this is effectively a penal maximalism, one that uses sensory deprivation as behavior control. Administrators counter that ADX does not exist to cure, but to protect. Protect staff and society from inmates who have shown they will continue to be threats if not tightly controlled. That lodged debate, security versus humanity, is the moral axis on which ADX sits. The design reduces variables. Doors open only when sequences are correctly followed. Sight lines from towers and cameras overlay, so that even small acts are visible in multiple feeds. Exercise cages are individual and covered. There are no yard fights here. Even the choice of materials matters. Concrete resists tunneling, reinforced fixtures resist conversion into weapons, and the absence of movable items removes opportunity. Cells are arranged into ranges. Each range can be isolated. Control rooms run the show. A few technicians and officers, monitors and switches, the modern core of a mechanical panopticon. The architecture itself disciplines. It is the built environment of containment, solitary confinement, at the level practiced in Supermax units. Changes minds. Research and testimonies show prolonged isolation can cause anxiety, hallucinations, and cognitive decline. At ADX, with 23 hours or more spent alone, inmates face a regimen that courts and human rights organizations have repeatedly scrutinized. Administrators insist the duration of stays are tied to behavior and security needs. Critics point to cases where long-term isolation looks more like indefinite punishment. The prison's internal logic is that isolation removes the opportunity for coordinated violence. The external cost is human suffering that raises questions about proportionality, law, and ethics. Operating ADX is choreography, meal passes, medication distribution, recreation opportunities, and legal visits run on sequences that protect staff and prevent contraband. Prisoners move through slots and sally ports, doors that open into small containment spaces within a larger vault system, such that if there's a breach at one stage, the next door can still be held. Officers wear body armor and follow checklists. Cameras backstop human fallibility. In short, ADX replaces trust with procedure. The result is a system that runs reliably, and some argue unrelentingly, day after day. From the outset, ADX's practices have prompted litigation and public scrutiny. Lawsuits have challenged the effects of prolonged isolation and argued that certain practices violate constitutional protections or international human rights norms. Human rights groups have cited cases of psychological damage and called for reforms or alternative security strategies. Conversely, corrections unions and many federal officials defend the model as a last resort tool to ensure safety. These debates are not theoretical. They appear in real court filings, medical testimony, and occasional high-profile transfer of inmates who become symbols of the conflict over Supermax practices. ADX's construction and operation have economic impacts. When Florence sought the complex, the promise of jobs and federal investment mattered to a town facing economic strain. Locals voted for prisons in part to revitalize the county with stable employment. The federal government invested tens of millions in construction and millions annually in operations. But beyond jobs, there is a cost and moral calculation. Funding a facility oriented toward absolute containment instead of rehabilitation diverts resources and shapes local economies around incarceration. The physical cost is concrete and cameras. The social cost is harder to measure. Many prison escape legends exist, but ADX's record is telling. Unlike spectacular jailbreaks of popular imagination, ADX has remained effectively escape-proof, precisely because of its redundant systems. Where others failed, because of tunnel gaps, complicity, or overlooked vulnerabilities, ADX was designed to anticipate and block. The facility's combination of sensors, towers, gates, and strict human procedure converts escape into a near-impossible task. That doesn't mean the myth dies. Indeed, the very idea of a place no one can leave feeds our cultural fascination. But on the ground, the fact is that ADX functions as designed. Containment succeeded where other models found limits. Among the statistics and blueprints are small human details. A counselor who remembers a man who refused to talk for years, a guard who described the monotony pierced by rare, sharp incidents, and lawyers who recounted procedural obstacles to privacy and communication. Inmates have written about the days, the timekeeping, and the ways the mind invents company. These first-person traces are harder to sanitize than any security manual. They are the lived ledger of ADX's effect. When you read the letters smuggled out with effort, or the legal filings that describe a prisoner's decline, you find not just a file number, but a life compressed by design. Why build such a place? The simplest answer is blunt: to neutralize the most dangerous actors in a way other prisons could not. The deeper answer traces to policy choices, to a securitizing impulse that values prevention and risk aversion above restorative possibilities. ADX embodies assertion of state power, that when someone's capacity for harm is order of magnitude greater than others, the state can and will isolate them in perpetuity. Whether that policy is necessary or moral remains contested, but it's clear that ADX is both a correctional instrument and a symbol, the point where fear, law, and architecture intersect. Around the world, various nations have their equivalents of Supermax units, and some have facilities with different emphases. Some use secure psychiatric containment for the most violent. Others segregate high-risk prisoners in different ways. ADX has claimed the title most protected, relies on a combination of technology, procedure, and the political will behind it. In international human rights discourse, ADX is often cited as an extreme case, a useful comparator to debate limits on isolation, and propose alternatives that reduce harm while maintaining safety. These conversations matter as other nations look to replicate or resist the Supermax model. Human rights organizations contend that prolonged solitary confinement can constitute cruel and unusual punishment. Courtrooms periodically test these claims. The Bureau of Prisons responds with data focusing on incidents prevented and procedures followed. The legal fight centers on thresholds. How long is too long? What monitoring is sufficient? Who gets classified as special management? And crucially, can there be due process inside an environment designed to minimize human interaction? These are live questions in prison law and constitutional litigation. Policy shifts happen. In recent decades of prison population, sentencing laws, and political winds have shaped corrections. For ADX, the future could mean reforms to limit the length of stays, enhance mental health services, or alternative models that secure inmates while allowing for more human contact. Or, conversely, global threats and domestic violence trends could cement ADX's role as a permanent, non-negotiable instrument. What the future holds depends on judges, lawmakers, and public will. For now, ADX continues to operate on a logic of containment that its architects consider necessary and its critics consider excessive. As we look back over the blueprints, the towers, and the faces of men who have been consigned there, the question returns: what kind of society builds a place designed to erase company and compress time? ADX Florence is an engineering success, a calculated, layered, and redundant machine of containment. It is also a moral challenge, a place that forces us to decide whether absolute protection is worth the price of radical isolation. The fortress holds. The question remains whether, in holding the most dangerous among us, we are also holding to an answer about what punishment should mean in a democratic society. When the lights are out and the towers stand black against the prairie, the architecture does its silent work. The built environment enforces a solitude so profound that it becomes a story itself, not only of criminals and law, but of the choices that created this place. ADX is a modern myth made of concrete and policy. It is a testament to control, a challenge to conscience, and a reminder that the most protected places are also the most revealing about who we fear and what we will do to keep that fear at bay.